welcome to Cookie Class, our 2024 Christmas class. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm going to go over what is in your cookie kit right now. If you can go ahead and get a paper towel out, a nice sharp pair of scissors, and then I'm going to go over what's in this box. So we have our icing pods right here. You're going to want to let those defrost for about 15 minutes or so, and then you can take them out of this little bag here. We have all of our cookies, so you're going to want to set those aside. Our featured flavor today is gingerbread. It's one of my faves. And then there's also some sprinkles here, and then our little packet that has all our little extra goodies in here. So first off, extra piping bags in case you cut any holes too big. You definitely need to save one on the side for your white details at the end, so there's an extra couple in there as well. Our practice sheet, so you're going to want to set that in front of you. A little picture of our cookies. I like to have that in front of me while I'm decorating, just it's good to have for reference. We have a piece of parchment paper as well as some stars on a template here. We're going to use that for our royal icing transfer, scribe tool. Lastly, we've got a marker and a little bow cut out to help us with our mini bow. So go ahead and get all of that out and we'll get started. All right, we are going to practice with our yellow icing. There is a very specific way to cut your piping bag. If you cut your hole too small, the icing is going to come out curly on you. If you cut your hole too big, it's going to come out too fast. So there is a very specific way to cut this bag. So whenever I'm cutting a small hole out of my bag, I have a seam on the bag. I always point that up toward the ceiling. So if you look at your yellow bag, you can kind of feel the seam. I have it facing up, centered, and I flatten my tip. So anytime I cut my bag, I want to cut smaller than I think I need, because you can always cut more, but you can't take it back. So you have to be really, really careful initially. If you do end up cutting your hole too small at first, you can just do the same thing where you're gonna center that seam, flatten the tip, cut a teeny tiny hole straight across again. But you always want that seam centered facing up when you're cutting your piping bag. So teeny tiny hole straight across. I always squeeze the air out onto my paper towel, and my goal is to get my yellow icing as thick as this black line, okay? We do have stuff going on in the background. It has been a crazy month. We have some baking going on right now at the studio, so that is what you're hearing in the back. The way that I hold my bag is I pinch at the top, either on the tape or below the tape with my thumb and my pointer finger, and then I roll the pod so it's nice and tight. I rest the pod in the palm of my hand, and I am going to, while I squeeze this tape closed, because that tape will not prevent the icing from coming out the top, I'm going to put pressure with these 3 fingers as well. Again, my goal is to get my icing as thick as this black line. I don't want it much thicker, and I also don't want to see any black underneath. I like to hold my wrist steady, so I start by touching my tip on the paper. I always touch the paper first, then I squeeze and I lift immediately as soon as the icing hits the paper, and then I just let the icing fall on the line, squeezing just hard enough for that line to not break. And then when I get close to the end, because I'm lifting, I release the pressure a little early, then I lay the rest down. Now if your line is breaking, that means you're not squeezing hard enough. If your line is squiggly, either you're squeezing too hard or you are your hole might be too small. Also, you want to make sure you don't have any crusties on your tip, so I'm often just giving it a little bit of swipe. I'm going to show you up close how high I hold my bag. So what I do is I touch my tip to the paper, squeeze gently, lift immediately to prevent a bump in the beginning, and then I'm lifting about an inch high, letting the icing fall, release the pressure early, lay the line down. All right, I'm going to show you, why don't you guys start with the lines, pause this and then you guys can go and I'll show you the rest of the practice sheet. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do our waves and our swirls. So what I do here is I touch just like before, tip touches, squeeze, lift immediately. This time I am looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, and I'm also going even slower. I'm still lifting, release the pressure, lay that down, give my tip a little swipe. Same thing here, tip is touching, squeeze, lift, looking a little bit ahead of where you want that icing to fall. Squeezing just hard enough for that line to not break. Now, if you're having issues with the icing curling here, cut your hole a little bit more, but just a reminder, you want that seam facing up and flatten the tip before you cut. With the circle here, you are going to do the same thing, but you're going to go even slower. So my tip touches, I lift up, I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, taking my time. I'm looking at the black line below. I'm not looking at the yellow line. I want to look at where I want that icing to fall. Squeezing just a little bit, release the pressure, lay that down. And then the last thing here with the heart is every point or edge, you're gonna put your tip down. So I have a starting point, I lift up, I look a little bit ahead, again, where I want that icing to fall. When I get here to this point, my tip is gonna go back down. And then I start where I left off. And this way I get nice sharp edges and I regain control of that icing. All right, so when you're done with your practice sheet, you're just gonna fold it in half. And then you can take out your little piece of parchment paper and star template. All right, so what we are going to do now is our little star decoration that we have on our tree. If you notice, the star is kind of coming off the tree, and the only way we can achieve that is by making that star ahead of time and letting it crust so that we can just stick it on wherever we would like. So what I do is I do have my parchment on a clipboard because I am going to put it in front of a fan to dry because it will dry quicker that way. You can tape it down on the table or just set it aside and let that dry. But I'm putting my little star template piece of paper underneath the parchment paper. Now you only need to have 2 stars for your tree. However, I always like people to make an extra 1 or 2 just in case a star breaks. So I'm going to show you guys how to outline and fill that in. Just real quick, I just kind of want to go over how this class goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you here on the screen, and then you guys can pause the video and work on yours, and then whenever you're ready you can just restart that. So I'm going to show you how to outline these, how to fill them in. I'm also going to get my sprinkles ready as I need to use them for my stars. Here we go. So I like to hold my paper down. What you're going to do is you're going to touch your tip into that little corner of the star, and I just lift just slightly, and then my tip goes down. And I'm going to go all the way around the star doing the same thing. You don't need to lift very high here. You can almost drag your tip of your bag on the parchment paper. You do want to outline your stars first. So I want you to outline all 3 or 4 stars first, and then you can go back and fill it in. So outline first, then you can fill in your stars. If you want a more curvy star, you just won't point as defined here. But what I'm going to do, pretend I've outlined all the stars that I want. Now I'm going to come back and fill them in. I have my sprinkles ready because I want to add sprinkles as soon as I fill it in, because this royal icing does crust pretty quickly and I want them to stick on the star. So once you fill in a star, you're going to add sprinkles all the way down the line. So to fill this in, I'm going to almost touch my tip on that parchment, and I'm squeezing and I'm kind of pushing the icing around with the tip of my bag. So I'm squeezing and jiggling my tip in there until it smooths out. jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And now it's nice and puffy, and I can slowly bring the tip of my bag up. And then I'm going to take my little sprinkles, and I like to actually just pinch them and drizzle them on. Remember, you want to just add those sprinkles right away, and then you can move on to your next one. So I'm really close to the parchment as I'm squeezing the icing out and pushing the icing around with the tip of my bag as I fill in the star. And you guys are going to go ahead and you can make as many stars as you'd like. Remember to add the sprinkles right away, and then when you're done with them, either set them aside, put them in front of a fan. If you decide to do that, then I would suggest taping the parchment down onto the counter, and then you can have those dry for the remainder of the class. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to outline your tree cookie. I'm going to show you how to outline this and start filling it in on one cookie, but when you guys go to do it, you're going to do both of your cookies. You can go ahead and give your green a massage as well as your brown icing. Now I'm going to show you how to cut this bag again. The seam is facing up. I flatten the tip. Our green icing is a thinner consistency than what you practiced with, so you are going to want to cut just a little bit smaller than you did with your brown. With your yellow. Squeeze the air out, make sure the hole's the right size, and that looks good for me. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to outline. I like to outline my cookies because it helps prevent the icing from spilling over the edge. So I start right here. I'm starting with the green of the tree, kind of a little bit more than halfway down the ear. My tip touches, and I lift up, and I'm doing sort of like a rounded triangle here. I like to go as close to the edge of the cookie at the top, and then my tip goes down. Then I'm going to connect, so I'm lifting here, and I'm doing waves. You guys should all be good at these waves because you did it on your practice sheet, right? So my tip goes back down. Now, the way that I know where to start the next section of the tree is I'm looking right here at this corner, and this is where it's going to be brought up, so I know to start right here. My tip touches, I lift, looking ahead of where I want that icing to fall. I'm still lifting here, kind of doing waves, and then all the way around right here until I get to that point. Last one, tip is touching, I lift, and I just messed up. Oh no. So you guys have your little wooden scribe. I'm using the one I use here at classes, but you're just going to wipe off. It is okay if you mess up, but you do want to just wipe it off. Don't wipe the whole cookie off, just a little bit. Keep your scribe tool clean, and you're going to finish this bottom one. So the outline does not need to be perfect here. It just needs to be a closed cookie, because most of this cookie is going to be decorated on, almost hiding everything, okay? So now I'm going to outline the stump here and cut a small hole just like I did with the green. And my tip touches here, I lift, touches down, touch and lift. And then lastly, I'm going to outline those ears. So I have my black, my seam is centered. I'm going to cut a small hole. This one doesn't have to be as small because it's a thicker consistency here. So I'm just going to touch my tip and go as close to the edge as I can go, all the way until I hit the green. When you are done outlining both of your trees, you're going to go back to your first tree and start filling it in. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So once this tree is outlined, once both trees are outlined, now we're going to start filling this in. If we filled this cookie in with this teeny tiny hole, our bag would probably burst. It would take too long and the icing would start to crust. So we're going to go ahead and cut our hole just a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to cut just a touch more. Again, I can adjust I don't want to cut it too big. But you're especially now going to hold that tape closed because the icing is going to come out. We're going to be squeezing harder. So before I was telling you to touch your tip and lift for our outline. However, now we're going to almost touch our tip to the cookie and we're squeezing. And as I squeeze, I push the icing around and I leave my tip close to the cookie and kind of jiggle this around. Now you really want to puff this up. And if you notice, I'm not going to leave any holes, okay? So I'm filling this in. There's a few ways to smooth this out. It won't smooth out on its own. You can either reinsert your tip and kind of jiggle the icing. I'm going to show you on the next part of the cookie how to flood the other way. So you're not going to fill in the middle section. I'm going to fill in the bottom. If you look at the photo, there's a little bit of definition with this tree. There's 3 sections. If I filled in all 3 of these right now, they would run into each other and it would just look like one big section of tree. So we have 3 separate sections. We're going to allow this to crust before we fill in anything else on the tree. So I'm filling this in nice and full, no holes. And then you can either insert your tip like I was doing before. You can either do a gentle stab of the cookie and give it a shake. Or you can hold your scribe like a pencil and kind of just jiggle the surface. So you don't want to dig your scribe tool in there. If you are having to spread this icing around a bunch with your scribe tool and like kind of push icing around, that most likely means that you did not put enough icing in on the cookie. So you want to make sure it's nice and puffy. So go ahead and flood both of your trees and then I'm going to show you the next step. Now we're going to go ahead and outline and start to fill in our Gingy Minnie Mouse. So I forgot to mention that if your icing is spilling over the edge, you want to check after you flood each cookie, especially with her. If icing's spilling over, all you're going to do is just swipe your scribe tool around it and wipe it off. But if you wait too long, the icing will start to crust and you're going to crack your icing surface. So you want to check after you flood each cookie. But I'm going to show you how to outline and flood this guy. So we have our little bow template here. I'm going to just hold this down. This is just going to help guide where the bow goes so that they can look even on both cookies, and it just helps that we can trace this. So I'm just holding the template down. I'm using the edible marker to outline. You don't need to outline the bottom because I'm going to show you what this is going to look like. So the first thing you're going to do, once you're done flooding those 2 sections of the tree, you're going to outline her bow first. I start here at the top, so you're going to cut a small hole and I lift up. And I'm going to trace that black line. My tip goes down at this little corner here, and then I lift up again. And this is what I call a little kidney bean. Okay, so one side is done, now the other side. So these are not touching. These sides are 2 separate sides of the bow. Tip touches, and then I lift up and make my little kidney bean. It's okay that there's space in the middle. Then I'm going to take my brown and outline my Gingy girl. So I'm lifting here, going as close to the edge as I can go, and then my tip goes down. Just like we practiced with that heart, you want to put your tip down at every point, every corner, tip down. Lift up, tip goes back down, and I'm going to do this all the way around the cookie. Tip down, lift up, down, up again, all the way around. Tip down, lift. These are curved arms, so I'm not putting my tip down until I get here. Lifting. Once both of your Gingy girls are outlined, you're going to start filling them in. So outline both, And now we can start to flood. And again, when I flood, I'm going to cut my hole bigger. You definitely want to massage your brown. If you did not massage it and you've already cut your bag, just hold the tip closed and give it another massage. And then I'm going to cut my hole maybe just a touch bigger than I did the green, just because this is a larger cookie. You do need to move quickly. And again, I would definitely check for spillage here as you're filling this in. So I'm holding that tape closed. My tip stays close to the cookie, and I just kind of smooth it out as I go around the cookie. I like to start with her head and go down. I don't want to smooth this out or spread icing around with my scribe tool too much if I can prevent that. Once I go around her bow, I'm going to go up the bow, up the center of the bow. See how I did that? And then fill in, moving quickly, jiggling. And then once you're done flooding, check to make sure she's not spilling over. She is more likely to spill over than the tree, just because this brown is a touch looser of a consistency, and her curviness just it tends to spill over more. So I just fill this in. If you need to, do the stab, gentle stab and shake. I make sure my scribe is clean, and you can just kind of jiggle the surface anywhere that needs to smooth out. As long as you put enough icing in there, it should smooth out nicely. So go ahead and flood both Gingy girls, and then meet me back here. All right. If you guys could smell the studio right now, Kayla is making gingerbread cookies, and it smells amazing. Once both Gingy girls are filled in, you're going to come back to your tree, and the 3 to 4 minutes or so that we had this crust is enough time to crust it enough to where we're going to get that definition that we want. So I'm only filling in this tree. We can also actually fill in the tree stump as well, but I'm not filling in the ears because the green that I'm just flooding right now is touching the ears, and I just want to make sure the ears keep their nice shape as well as the tree. So I just fill this in, jiggle, 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 slowly move my tip up, and if I have any peaks, I just barely touch it to smooth it out. And then as with the stump, I'm just going to fill this in as well. Now, since you're taking these at home, if you have a little table fan to that you can put on to allow these to crust faster, that would actually be really helpful for you to go through the class a little bit more quickly. But once you're done with flooding both of those in, we are going to start our candy cane. Once the middle of your tree is filled in, as well as your stump, you're going to move on to your candy cane. Now I'm going to cut my white hole for my outline, just like I did with the brown and green. When I start this, I'm going to start my tip right here on the candy cane, and then I lift up and I go around. I'm looking kind of at the top of the candy cane as I do this, just to evenly space it out. I am lifting this whole time, so I would consider this your challenge cookie of the day. What's nice about doing this at home is you can rewind this part over and over and over again to watch it if you need to, but I'm lifting this whole time, going as close to the edge as I can go, all the way around, and now my tip touches. Once I've done that, now I'm going to do 7 lines. I start here, and I'm not going straight across, I'm kind of slightly curving this to the other side. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and one more will be 7. Once you have finished that, you're going to start filling in just the white sections. I want the white to crust like we've done on our tree, and then we'll fill in the red section. So now I can cut my white hole bigger to fill in the white sections. We are going to need to rebag this white at the end when we start our details, but for now we can just cut it bigger to make flooding easier here. So you're just gonna flood in the white. Now you don't have to do white if you want to do like a green and red candy cane, or it's pretty much the only other thing that will look cute, or green and white, that would also be very cute. But I'm just filling this in. I'm gonna go all the way up the candy cane. Once we're done flooding this, we're going to go back to our Gingy girl. Now, when you guys decorate these, you're gonna spend a little bit of time allowing these to crust, okay? There's about a 3 to 4 minute amount of time that these need to crust on the surface before adding colors next to it. So I'm not gonna add my red until it's been at least 4 minutes. And details wise, I want to wait for that until it's been a few minutes as well. So we're going to go ahead and finish that, and then we'll go ahead and go back to our Gingy girl. All right, now that I have allowed this white to crust for about 4 or 5 minutes or so, I'm going to cut my red hole bigger to fill in the red sections. Now this red is a little bit thicker than I would like. So I'm going to show you how to smooth out icing that maybe is just a little too thick. So I cut my hole nice and big. I'm going to go right up against the white. You still don't want to cut your hole crazy big because you still want to have control of that icing coming out. But in order for this red to smooth over, you need to make sure you fill it with enough icing. So I'm squeezing and jiggling at the same time as I fill it in. You can take your scribe to kind of clean up the sides if you want, but we're really going to be kind of covering in between these colors and cleaning it up a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way up the cookie. So I fill it in. It's not going to smooth out on its own. I insert my tip and squeeze gently, and as I'm jiggling my tip, I'm slowly going up the icing up to the surface, and I'm going to go all the way around the cookie. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. Once you guys are done with this, you're going to allow the cookies to crust for a few minutes before you start your details. I'm going to show you details on each cookie. You really can go on in any order. You just want to start with the cookie that is the most dry. In my case, it will be the tree, so I'll go ahead and show you guys those details first. So smoothing it out before you come in with your scribe to kind of jiggle the surface if you need to. All right, now that we're ready to start our details, our white icing hole is too big, so we actually need to rebag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a big giant hole out of my white that I have. I'm going to take an empty bag and insert the old bag into the new bag. I'm squeezing the tail of the old bag and the outside of the new bag and just pulling the tail out while I'm squeezing this closed, and it's pushing the icing into the new bag. So now I have two separate bags. One is empty, one is full, and I'm just going to tie this in a knot. Now you can do this with any of your colors. I am probably going to do that with my red when I get to those details. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over here. I'm going to show you all of the details now, I guess. Yeah, so we'll start with the tree. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a nice small hole out of my white. And keep in mind you need it small because we're doing all that little icing work on our Gingy girl. The first thing I'm going to do is our little garland here. So I touch my tip right here where the black and the green meat, and I slightly dip. Now I would recommend that you test your white icing on the parchment before, or on your paper towel before you do it to your cookie, because if your hole is too small, it's going to curl on you and you can't really take these details off. Now I left enough room for my star as well as some ornaments underneath the white garland. So now I'm going to touch here, I lift up and release the pressure, tip back down. And then here as well, lift up, tip back down. That is the first detail you're going to do on your cookies. We want this white icing to crust before we start to do the decoration. So I'm going to come back to my Gingy girl and we'll start her details now. We're going to let that white garland crust for a few minutes. I think that was the iPad. I cut a small hole out of my red, and I'm just going to fill in her bow. Now as I fill this in, I'm kind of pushing it up the brown against the brown icing, making it nice and puffy. And I'll do the other side. Nice and puffy again. And then at this point too, you can add sprinkles to her bow, which I'm going to show you. This is optional. I'm just going to gently drizzle on some of these sprinkles here. You can also use your white icing to make polka dots, or you can just keep it plain like it is in the photo. I thought that looked kind of cute. If you get any sprinkles on her, I would leave it for a few minutes and then you can gently flick it off. So once that is done, now we can add the white details. So I'm going to outline her with my white icing just like we did in the beginning. So I'm lifting here all the way around and my tip goes down. Make sure you're keeping your tip nice and clean and no crusties on there. And I'm lifting, tip down. Going all the way around the cookie. Lifting here, tip down, lifting, tip down. Feel free to do any sort of detail outfit you want to put on her. You don't have to do it this exact way. All right, so once that is done, now I can come on her, go to her ears and just tip is down. I lift up and I'm lifting here and I'm going back and forth, back and forth. I'll do the other side, touching, lifting. This is why you need a small hole. And tip goes down. For her little waves on her arms, I'm almost dragging my tip on the cookie as I do the little waves on her arms and legs. So I'm not lifting very high here. I'm very close to the cookie as I go around. Lastly, I'm going to do a little wave on her dress. So I'm lifting and going up and down. Feel free to be creative on that. Now I'm going to add her eyes. So to do her eyes, now she can either look like she just got her lashes done and they're looking great, or she can look like she had a very long night. So you just want to practice these first. I would definitely practice them on a paper towel before you do it on your cookie, but this is how I do the eyes. What I do first is I'm looking at the photo and I'm going to first apply 2 dots where I want these eyes to be. That way, if I don't like where that lands, I can kind of adjust it as I make the dots bigger. So now that I like them, I'm going to hold my tip close, but not too close. I'm not dragging, but I'm just above the cookie. And I'm squeezing at the same time I'm going up and down with my piping bag. So squeeze, going down. I'm still squeezing gently. You don't have to do these kind of eyes. You can be creative and do whatever you would like. Her nose goes right here, so I'm doing the same thing, but I'm going side to side. She gets a little smiley face. Now to do her lashes, you can wait until she completely dries and use that marker to draw them, or you can use your icing, and I'm just going to gently drag my tip on the cookie as I make her lashes. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead and we're going to come back to her. I want to make sure she crusts a little bit more before I add her little buttons. Coming back to the tree, and now I can cut my black hole bigger to fill in the ears. Now this is pretty much a similar consistency to our red, so you really need to work with it to get it to smooth out. You want it nice and puffy. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. And the other side. And now that that white garland has crusted, I can actually start to add the ornaments. So I'm going to show you actually how to finish this cookie first. Then we'll finish our Gingy girl, and then I'll show you the final steps to the candy cane. I'm going to start by adding the ornaments on the tree. Now, because the icing is still really wet underneath, you are going to need to spread these out just a touch more than you are thinking, because they will spread a touch more. So my tip touches the cookie. I squeeze, 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 squeeze until I get the size dot that I want. I'm squeezing and leaving my tip close to the cookie until I get that size dot. Before I lift up, I release the pressure, and then I lift. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until I get that size dot that I want. Feel free to be creative with, you know, any which way you want to do your decorations. After the red has been added, then I'm going to add my green. Just right next to it, but not touching. The green will spread a touch, so you just want to keep that in mind. Just a teeny tiny green. I'm barely touching the cookie, but I'm remembering to release that pressure before I lift up. And then the last is going to be the yellow. And then the very last step for this cookie is adding the star. So I took the stars off the clipboard here, and to detach them, because these are probably still a little bit wet, I'm going to kind of have my finger underneath and lift up each point of the star. And then once that's done, I can carefully remove it. You want to still handle these very gently because they are a little bit wet still. I'm going to apply some yellow onto the top of the tree, and then carefully take my star and place it on that dot that I made. So we can have this hang off the tree a bit, which is fun. So cute. That's our first finished cookie. Now we're gonna finish our Gingy girl. To finish this design, we're gonna come back to our little bow, and I'm going to take my red and squeeze, 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 squeeze to make a little dot, however big that you want. And then she's also going to get some buttons. Now what I would recommend with these buttons is to add the green first, wait maybe like a minute because it will spread a little bit, and then add another yellow dot to match the size of the green. The green is going to spread a touch. You can also make some little designs here if you want. You can make little dots. That is optional. Oh, that looked cute though. Some students really got creative with their little design. So feel free to just be creative here. But now I'm going to show you the last steps of our candy cane. To finish our candy cane, we're going to go ahead and just add a few lines on here. It's very simple. I'm taking my green, and right between the red and the white, I'm adding some green lines. So my tip is touching, and I lift, and then my tip touches the other end. Then I'm going to go all the way up the candy cane. I'm going to add red right on top of red. And then the final color will be our yellow, which is going to go on top of the white. I just love this candy cane. That is it. That will complete your Christmas cookies for 2024. But I just want to hop on here real quick and just say thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you so much for signing up. It means so much to me and my little business, and I just couldn't be more grateful for you guys and your support. But I hope you love your cookies, and thank you again for joining. Merry Christmas.